Welcome back to another episode of The Bearded Console Gamer, and this time we are talking about Star Wars Squadrons. We'll get into everything we know about the game so far, along with impressions of some of the design features that have been showcased in gameplay and trailers to date. The game burst onto our computer screens and into our lives with a high-octane cinematic-style trailer created from game engine footage. The trailer was designed to show off the beauty of the game while also just getting people more hyped for EA Play 2020, something which, in my opinion, it did admirably well. During the video, it was revealed that Squadrons is set to be a 5v5 dogfighting game that pits pilots of the New Republic against those of the beleaguered Galactic Empire. More importantly, it let us know that we wouldn't have to wait long to get our hands on this chunky nugget of sci-fi goodness, as Star Wars Squadrons is set to release on the 2nd of October this year. Now, the EA Play presentation that followed the trailer gave us a ton more information and even some of that all-important gameplay, so let's unpackage that. The game kicks off with a single-player mode set soon after the event in Return of the Jedi. At the outset, players are asked to create one pilot for each of the two factions in the game. Throughout the single-player campaign, you'll switch back and forth, taking control of both pilots and therefore experiencing the perspective and challenges faced by both the Empire Remnant and the New Republic during this chaotic period of galactic turmoil. When flying for the Empire, you'll be a member of the elite Vanguard Squadron, and as a New Republic pilot, you'll join Titan Squadron. As little as we're aware at the moment as to the plot of the single-player campaign, we do know that it's focused around the New Republic Starhawk project, which, judging by the footage we've seen so far, involves the production of a big-ass ship. We're sure to meet a lot of new and interesting characters as the campaign unfolds, and according to Ian Fraser, the director of Motive Studios who are developing the game, we're also going to come across some familiar faces, taking bets that one of those familiar faces will be Leia Organa. It just makes a huge amount of sense considering her leadership role in the original trilogy and subsequently the last three movies. There will also be a practice range where you can hone your starfighter skills before jumping into the only part of the game that anyone really cares about, the multiplayer section. Two multiplayer game modes have been revealed to us at this point. First up, we have Dogfight, which pits squadrons against each other in 5v5 battles set against gorgeous galactic backdrops. The second mode, which I am by far the most hyped for, is Fleet Battles. In this mode, you'll need to think strategically, as you and your wing fight through a multi-stage conflict similar in nature to Battlefront 2's Supremacy mode. In Fleet Battles, you'll be able to set your strategy with your friends in the social hub before taking to the cockpit of your starcraft. The first stage of the conflict will see you compete in a frenetic dogfight. The winner of this scrum then goes on to fight and hopefully destroy a pair of medium capital ships. If you're successful at that, you move on to strike the subsystems of a flagship in the final stage. If it's anything like Battlefront, this will be a tug of war, with defeat in one stage returning you to the initial dogfight section. If this is the case, I think you'll probably keep any minor victories won in the previous stages, like destroyed subsystems on the capital ships or just destroyed minor capital ships. If you aren't in the mood for taking on flesh and blood opponents, you can also play this mode against AIs, which I think is a really nice move. I mean, I don't always want to have to outsmart a real human person. Sometimes I just want to kick a computer in the nuts. Speaking of teaming up with friends, the game does support crossplay on PS4, Xbox One and PC, which will make your chances of being able to actually squad up with your friends all the more likely. Impressively, the entire game is available in VR, so I think it might actually be time for me to dust off my headset and crack it on for the first time in months, because the idea of looking around an X-Wing sends the small child inside me freaking insane. I think that one of the things I love most about this is that it's not just a shallow dogfighting game set in a universe we all love. It looks like there's some real depth to it. For starters, you get to manage the power in your spacecraft, shifting the power between lasers, engines, and shields. On a more detailed level, you can even shift the shield priority to sections of the ship you need protecting. For example, if you're being chased by an enemy interceptor, you can shift the shield to the back, and maybe boost your engine so you can try and get away from him. This isn't a revolutionary mechanic. I remember doing this in Free Space 2 all the way back in 1999, but I loved doing it 21 years ago, and I'm damn sure that I'm going to love doing it all over again in 2020. It really makes you feel like you're in control of the ship and tweaking its functions. It adds an important layer of depth and also just draws you further into that cockpit. At one point, Ian Fraser stated that it's going to be possible to pull off some advanced combat maneuvers in the game. For example, you could boost your engines, then cut them, flip 180 degrees to turn and fire on a pursuing fighter, all while drifting backwards. Being able to do that in an X-Wing is pretty much going to be a childhood dream come true. I'm sure that some people are going to be upset by the fact that the flight experience is entirely in cockpit rather than in third person, but I love it. Don't get me wrong, I loved Rogue Squadron, but my tastes are maturing just about as fast as my hairline can recede, and nowadays I am all about immersion. Speaking of the cockpit, the fact that there's a laser gauge kind of suggests to me that you're not going to be able to fire your lasers continuously at an enemy. Similarly, the components section may indicate that parts of the ship could be damaged in a modular way, or it might just be there to help you keep track of expendable resources such as missiles. More and more, these games are exploring the scenarios that played out in the gaps between the main Star Wars movies. Granted, these parts of the Star Wars history are covered really well in comics and novels, but video games are going to bring them to a more mainstream audience. Squadrons, like the single-player campaign of Battlefront 2, is set in the tumultuous period following the destruction of the second Death Star and the demise of the Emperor Vader's hands. We'll get to fly alongside ships made famous in that original iconic trilogy. Some, like the Star Destroyers and the Blockade Runners, are actually going to be the targets that we get to cripple and take down. Now, to that end, a range of ships have been featured as playable in the trailer and the gameplay, and this feels like an area that's ripe for DLC expansion, or, if EA is actually feeling smart, free future content. Each of the classes, the Fighter, Interceptor, Support, and Bomber, have distinct roles in the team. And it sounds like if you want to be a successful squadron, you're going to need to organise a cohesive approach to an objective using a mixture of the available classes. I'm not sure how well that's going to work when you're trying to coordinate with strangers online, but it's definitely going to make for some interesting discussions among friends. Fighters are flexible, while interceptors are faster and geared towards dogfighting. Support ships can resupply friendly ships and disrupt enemies, and bombers are of course the damage dealers. The New Republic fighter is the classic X-Wing, and the Interceptor is the A-Wing. Their support is the U-Wing, which was popularised as Cassian Andor's ship in Rogue One, while the bomber is my personal favourite in the Star Wars franchise, the Y-Wing, just because it looks so clunky and derpy and I love it. For the Empire, you can opt for a TIE Fighter, TIE Interceptor, TIE Reaper, or TIE Bomber. The Empire could have maybe been a tiny bit more imaginative in their naming process, but I'm sure they had other things to deal with. Now, for me, 8 ships just isn't enough of a lineup at launch. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more added. For example, where's my B-Wing? Give me my B-Wing right now. I want to fly in my B-Wing. Seriously though, there's got to be like 30 to 50 variations of TIE Fighter in canon, so there's going to be a lot of depth eventually. If they want to keep adding ships, they can keep adding ships. It's not like there isn't the source material for it. Also, I may have meant in Legends rather than in canon there. Please don't murder me, Star Wars fandom. There also appears to be a decent amount of customization on offer both for the ship and the pilot. These customization options are unlocked simply by progressing through the game. Hopefully there's not going to be any kind of microtransaction shenanigans, but in the trailer we can see custom skins for ships, race options, and even some cool bubble heads to place on the dash of your trusty X-Wing. In terms of unlockables that actually affect the gameplay, there are over 50 components that you can fit to your ship to suit your gameplay style or specific squadron needs. For example, you could opt to be offensive with a photon torpedo or disrupt enemy ships with an automatic ion cannon. Whether these components are class specific or not, we're not yet sure. Now, I love the idea of this. That amount of customization and that number of options means you may never really be sure what an enemy is about to throw your way. On the flip side of that, that many customization options could potentially lead to an issue in balancing, but we're just going to have to see how that unfolds when the game comes out. I love when they've set the game. It's right after the destruction of the Death Star. The Empire is reeling from both a massive military loss and also a massive loss of life. The Empire was still built up from people after all. And the New Republic now feels like they can take this victory and push the Empire and win. Despite how interesting that is, I would love to see the franchise take on the Clone Wars in a future iteration or even as DLC. Assuming that the forthcoming game proves to be successful, which it will because it lets you fly an X-Wing and shoot at a Star Destroyer. It's a foregone conclusion. And that is everything we know about Star Wars Squadrons so far. There's already so much to like here. It looks like we're finally gonna get the Star Wars flight game we've always wanted. It was a gap in my library, and now it's gonna be filled in one of the best ways possible. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and let me know any ships that you really want to get added to the lineup before launch or soon afterwards as part of DLC. If you enjoyed this video, which of course you did, please remember to like and subscribe, and just please stay safe out there. I'll catch you next time for more gaming news and reactions.